At a cabinet meeting on December 5th, Roosevelt appeared to make use of such information when he and Navy Secretary Frank Knox discussed the Japanese moves.
Well, you know, Mr. President, we know where the Japanese fleet is.
Yes, I think we ought to tell everybody how ticklish the situation is. We have information. You tell them, Frank.
Well, we have very secret information that the Japanese fleet is out. They're out of harbor. They're out at sea.
We haven't got anything like perfect information as to their apparent destination. The question is, in the minds of the Navy and in my mind, whether the fleet is going south. If they go south, the presumed objective is Singapore.
Every indication is that they are going south, Mr. President. That's the obvious direction.
But it's not absolutely certain that they couldn't be going north. You haven't got information that they are not.
Well, that's right, we haven't. But we must conclude that they are going south. It is so unlikely that they would go north. I don't think they're out just to maneuver. We in the Navy think they must be going to do something.
Saturday, I went in without Hosmer and plotted the information that I had, and I was excited enough about finding the fleet was 500 miles north of the Hawaiian Islands to drive to his home that Saturday afternoon and tell him what I had found and where it was, rather than giving any of this information by phone to him. However, we surmised between us something was going to happen, and whether it was definitely going to be the island.
The night before the attack, as the Japanese spy prepared to make his final signals, his original message to Tokyo was noticed by a translator in Navy intelligence in Washington. Dorothy Edgers, newly appointed to the section, asked her brother, Fred Woodruff, who worked alongside her, whether she should stay late that afternoon to work on it.
I looked at it, and I thought it was of sufficient interest. The subject matter was, as far as intelligence procedure, I thought was rather childish and amateurish. Establishing bonfires here, lights in the window there. The subject matter I couldn't think of being too important. However, the mere fact that a consul general in an important city is reporting it to the Foreign Office, the mere fact that this was being done to me seemed to be of some significance. Lieutenant Commander Kramer, who was at that time the head of Op 20GZ, which was the translation section, came in, and I hear that she asked him, showed him this message and asked his opinion of it. And he sort of took it lightly, which was sort of a disappointment to my sister, I believe. I think she thought that the information in there was of interest, and I think that she felt that it should be given attention. However, Lieutenant Commander Kramer thought that it's nothing there, that it couldn't wait until the next week, and so that was pretty much that.
That night, Japanese submarines off the island, watching for the final signals from the beach house, would also have been listening to sounds of Saturday night activity in Honolulu. At the Navy Department that Saturday, Commander Kramer, having dealt with the strange message about lights and bonfires, was in the Office of Naval Intelligence. That morning, OGG had placed the strike force 500 miles north of Pearl Harbor. But when Johann Raneft visited the office that afternoon and asked again about the carriers, he was shown a position due west of Honolulu. Raneft noted in his diary, "No one among us mentions the possibility of an attack on Pearl Harbor." At the Japanese embassy in Washington, as the remnants of codes and papers were destroyed, the last message of peace was intercepted. Roosevelt, when shown the message, declared, "This means war," but dictated no warnings. General George Marshall, the man who should have acted, was nowhere to be found. Colonel Rufus Bratton was responsible for keeping Marshall supplied with such vital information. For Bratton, Marshall's sudden unavailability at a time when America was on the brink of war could not have been accidental. Colonel William Heimlich, a fellow officer, heard directly of Bratton's frustration.
Colonel James Compton told me what I am about to tell you, and I later heard it from Colonel Bratton himself. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, Colonel Bratton called Compton at his home and asked him to come immediately to his, Bratton's, office. As he came in the office at about 6 o'clock, he found a relaxed Bratton seated at his desk with his feet up on it. And he said, "Jimmy, come in. They're going to lower the boom on us, and I need a witness." Colonel Compton seated himself, and Bratton made his first call to the Chief of Staff. His aim, of course, was to tell the Chief of Staff that, in his opinion, the intercepts and the information which he had available showed clearly that the Japanese were about to attack. He continued to call for the next several hours. Each time, the person taking the call reported to Bratton that General Marshall, the Chief of Staff, was out riding. Each time, out riding. And finally, in disgust, Bratton turned to Compton and said, "Jimmy, I'm going to make this the most famous horseback ride since Paul Revere."
Marshall eventually arrived to learn that Secretary of State Hull was to be given the note at exactly 1 p.m. In the Central Pacific, it was still dark. The Akagi and the other 5 carriers, now less than 200 miles from Pearl Harbor, swung into the wind for action stations. The danger to Pearl Harbor was suddenly real to Marshall, but his message to General Short, at long last warning him to be on guard, was sent deferred precedence. It was never to reach him in time. For Short and Kimmel, and all their soldiers and sailors, it was a sunny start to just one more lazy, peaceful Hawaiian Sunday morning.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago.
On December 8th, 1941, the United States of